The blood was still warm when they found Margaret Holloway hanging from the crystal chandelier in her Beacon Hill mansion. At her feet, scattered like cursed petals, were the winning lottery tickets. $23 million she had won, exactly 3 months earlier. Her daughter cried in the arms of the paramedics, whispering between sobs. She said we'd never have to go without anything again. She said an angel had appeared to her. I knew that angel was me. My name is Caetano Silva. I'm 12 years old and I look like I'm 70. I know it sounds impossible, but my whole life is an impossibility that walks the cobblestone streets of Boston's North End, carrying a Pokemon backpack and destroying lives with the best of intentions. Leave a comment telling us which city you're listening from. I love to know where our brave listeners are who venture into these supernatural narratives. When you finish listening to this story, leave a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell us what you liked best. It's very important to me. It was a rainy Tuesday in October when Margaret's tragedy happened. I was sitting on the steps of St. Leonard's Church watching people hurry by under their colorful umbrellas when I saw her for the first time. Margaret was in her 40s, with brown hair streaked gray at the ends, and she was carrying a shopping bag that clearly weighed more than her thin arms could handle. She stopped in front of the church, panting, and dropped some coins from the torn pocket of her coat. My child's heart sank. Even trapped in this wrinkled, hunched body, I was still that boy from Bethlehem who couldn't bear to see anyone suffering. I approached her with trembling steps, my cane tapping on the wet ground. "Ma'am, you dropped this," I said, offering her the coins with a voice that didn't match my young soul. Margaret looked at me with surprise, then with a genuine kindness that reminded me of my mother, a vague and precious memory from my 8 real years. "Thank you, dear. You're very kind," she said, tucking the coins carefully into her pocket. "Every penny counts when you have a little girl to feed." That's when it happened. That familiar feeling began to tingle at my fingertips, rising up my arms like warm electricity. My mouth moved before my brain could stop it. "May you never be in need again. May money come to you and your daughter never go hungry again." The words came out of me like a powerful whisper, charged with a force I didn't understand, but felt pulsing through every cell of my aging body. Margaret smiled, thanked me again, and walked away into the rain. 3 days later, she won the lottery. 3 months later, she was dead. I returned to the Franciscan Sisters' shelter with a heart as heavy as a stone in my chest. Sister Dolores was waiting for me in the kitchen, as she always did when I arrived late. Her expressive black eyes analyzed me with the intensity of someone who knows every nuance of my torments. "Caetano, you look pale, paler than usual," she said, pouring me a cup of chamomile tea she knew I liked. "What happened today?" Sister Dolores Montenegro was the only person in the world who really knew me. She found me 2 years ago, wandering confused through the streets of the North End, with no memory of how I had arrived in Boston or why my body had aged 60 years while my mind remained 12. She never questioned my impossible story, only welcomed me with the same devotion she welcomed all the lost souls who came to her door. "Margaret Holloway killed herself," I murmured, sinking into the wooden chair she had padded with cushions, for my frail body. Sister Dolores' face contorted in pain. She pulled a thick notebook from a drawer, her journal of coincidences, as she called it. There were already more than 200 pages filled with names, dates, and consequences, all the people I had tried to help, all the disasters I had caused. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice soft but firm. I told her about our meeting, in the rain, about my involuntary blessing, about the 23 million that brought only misery. Sister Dolores wrote down every detail in her careful handwriting, interspersing short prayers in Latin between the sentences. "Caetano, son, you need to understand that it's not your fault," she said after a long silence. "You're 12 years old. You have a pure heart. You can't be held responsible for what happens next." But I knew I was responsible. Every day I breathed, every person I crossed paths with, I was a time bomb of good intentions ready to explode into tragedy. That night, lying in the small bed in my room, decorated with superhero posters that Sister Dolores had bought to make me feel more like the child I was inside, I thought about my impossible life. My last clear memories were of Belém, of the backyard of Grandma Irene's house, playing with my cousins in the Amazonian heat. I was 8 years old, with straight black hair and knees always scraped from running. Then, just a black void until I woke up in a Boston hospital 4 years later, with this body that doesn't belong to me and fluent in an English I don't remember learning. The doctors said I had been found unconscious at the port, with no documents, no identity. A medical anomaly, they called it. A scientific mystery. But I knew the truth they couldn't accept. I was a cursed child, doomed to spread misfortune disguised as kindness wherever I went. Sleep was slow in coming, interrupted by the echoes of Margaret's daughter's sobs and the certainty that no matter how hard I tried to hide, there would always be someone in need of help right in front of me. And I, like the stubborn boy I had always been, could never say no. 2 weeks after Margaret's death, I was trying to be invisible. I spent my days hiding in the North End Public Library, pretending to read children's books while watching people, through the windows fogged up by the steam from the heater. It was my pathetic attempt to avoid human contact, to not cause any more tragedies with my damn good intentions. But fate, or whatever dark force controlled my existence, had other plans. "Excuse me, sir, can I sit here?" I looked up from the Harry Potter book I was pretending to read and saw a man in his 40s with messy brown hair, black-rimmed glasses, and a smile that was trying to be friendly, but hid something darker. He wore a gray wool coat and carried a worn leather briefcase, the kind of person who seemed harmless but my childish instincts told me to be wary of. "Sure," I muttered, trying to keep my voice in the hoarse old man tone people expected. He sat down in the armchair next to me, opened a notebook, and began typing. I pretended to go back to reading, but I could feel his eyes studying me, from time to time. After about 15 minutes, he leaned toward me. "Forgive me for intruding, but aren't you the gentleman who lives at the Franciscan Sisters' shelter?" My blood ran cold. "Why?" "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm an investigative journalist for the Boston Globe. I'm researching a series of interesting coincidences that have been happening in this area." He paused, taking a small tape recorder out of his pocket. "Can I ask you a few questions?" I wanted to run away, but my old, frail body wouldn't allow me to get very far. Besides, my childlike curiosity was piqued. What exactly did he know? "What kind of coincidences?" I asked, slowly closing the book. Marcus smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, over the past 2 years, there's been a statistically impossible series of events in the North End. People winning unexpected prizes and then suffering terrible tragedies. Miraculous medical recoveries followed by fatal relapses. Perfect marriages ending in violent divorces." Each word was a stab in my chest. He was talking about my victims, the people I had tried to help. "And what does that have to do with me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. All of these people had been through the shelter or had contact with someone there before the events occurred, and several of them mentioned a kind angel who had spoken to them shortly before their lives changed. My heart was beating so hard that I was sure he could hear it. Marcus leaned closer, his eyes fixed on mine. "Do you know Margaret Holloway? She killed herself 2 weeks ago after winning the lottery." I couldn't hide my reaction. My face must have contorted in pain because Marcus immediately realized he had touched a nerve. "You knew her," he said, not asking a question. I saw her a few times at church," I lied weakly. "Interesting, because the security cameras at St. Leonard's show you two talking in the rain 3 days before she won the lottery. And I have 5 witnesses who heard you say something about her never going to be in need again." The world began to spin around me. How had he found out all this? And more importantly, what did he intend to do with this information? "Sir?" He waited for me to say my name. "Caetano," I whispered. "Mr. Caetano, do you believe in coincidences?" "I believe you should stop harassing me," I said, trying to get up. Marcus placed his hand on my arm gently but firmly. "Please don't leave. I'm not here to accuse you of anything. I'm trying to understand a pattern that defies any logical explanation." I looked at him for a long moment, There was something in his eyes. It wasn't malice, it was fascination, scientific curiosity, or maybe even a little fear. What do you want from me? I want to understand how it works. I want to know if you're aware of what happens to people after you, interact with them. I slumped back into the chair, feeling the weight of all my secrets. For 2 years, only Sister Dolores had known the truth. Now this stranger had discovered my destructive pattern and wanted answers I didn't have. What if I tell you I don't know what you're talking about? Then I'll continue investigating on my own. And eventually I'll publish an article about the statistically impossible coincidences in the North End, mentioning an elderly man who seems to be at the center of all these events. He paused. Or you can help me understand, and maybe together we can find a way to prevent more tragedies from happening. Those last words hit me like a bolt of lightning. The possibility of preventing further tragedies, of not causing more deaths with my attempts to help? Do you really believe there could be an explanation? I asked, my voice coming out thinner. Younger than I intended. Marcus frowned, noticing the change in my tone. Mr. Caetano, may I ask you a personal question? How old are you? My blood ran cold again. 72. Interesting, because the way you talk, the books you choose to read, the way you move sometimes, I'd say you have the soul of a child. I stood up abruptly, my cane almost falling. I have to go. Caetano, wait. Marcus stood up too, quickly putting away his equipment. Look, I know this must be scary, but I'm not your enemy. I'm just someone trying to understand something that is beyond my comprehension. I stopped at the library door, turning to look at him one last time. What if some things are not meant to be understood? What if some questions are too dangerous to answer? Then at least 23 innocent people died or had their lives destroyed for nothing, he replied, with a brutal frankness that left me speechless. I left the library with trembling legs, not just because of my age, but because of the terror of being hunted. During the entire walk back to the shelter, I felt like I was being watched. Every shadow could hide Marcus with his camera. Every passerby could be a witness to my fatal conversations. When I finally got home, Sister Dolores was waiting for me in the kitchen with a worried expression I knew well. Caetano, there was a man here looking for you today. A journalist. I sank into a chair, burying my face in my wrinkled hands. He found me at the library. He knows everything, sister. Or at least he suspects. Sister Dolores sat down beside me, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. What does he want? Answers. And he threatened to publish an article if I don't cooperate. For a long moment, we were silent. Then Sister Dolores went to the drawer and took out her diary of coincidences, placing it on the table between us. Maybe it's time we understood what's going on with you, son. Maybe this journalist can help us find answers I couldn't find on my own. What if he wants to hand me over to the scientists? What if he turns me into an experiment? Sister. Dolores opened the diary to the first page, where she had pasted a faded Polaroid photo, me on the day she found me, lost and confused, looking like an old man, but with the frightened eyes of a child. Then we'll face it together. But Caetano, son, you can't keep hiding forever. With each passing day, you become more isolated, more frightened, and people continue to approach you naturally because there is something about you that attracts those who need help. She was right. No matter how hard I tried to hide, someone always appeared who needed a kind word, a friendly shoulder. And I, being the soft-hearted boy I always was, could never say no. What do you think we should do? I think we should talk to this Marcus Webb, but on our terms, here at home, where I can protect you. She closed the diary and looked at me with that maternal determination I knew so well. And who knows, maybe we'll finally find out why God allowed this to happen to you. That night, lying in my small bed, staring at the Superman and Batman posters Sister Dolores had stuck on the wall to make me feel more like the child I was, I thought of Margaret Holloway hanging from the chandelier, of all the other victims, of my damn kindness, and of the journalist who now knew my deadly secret. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a spark of something that could be hope. Maybe there was a way to break this curse. Maybe I could go back to helping people without destroying them. Or maybe I was about to unleash something much worse. Marcus Webb arrived at the shelter 3 days later, carrying an even fatter briefcase and a laptop that promised revelations I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. Sister Dolores welcomed him into the main room, the one with crucifixes on the walls and the smell of incense that always calmed me, but today only intensified my anxiety. "Mr. Webb," Sister Dolores said in her firm voice, which had faced human demons far worse than curious journalists. "Before we begin, I need to make it clear that Caetano is a minor under my protection. Anything we discover here cannot be used to harm him." Marcus paused in the middle of opening his laptop, looking between me and the nun with obvious confusion. "Minor? But he looks like he's 70 years old, I know," Sister Dolores interrupted. "But appearances can be deceiving, Mr. Webb, especially when we're dealing with something that defies the laws of nature. I was sitting in the armchair Sister Dolores had strategically chosen, with my back to the window, where the diffused light somewhat disguised the deep wrinkles on my face and perhaps made my young eyes more visible. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from fear of what was about to happen. "Caetano," Marcus said, his voice softer than in the library, "I've brought some information that may help you understand your situation. But first, I need you to tell me your side of the story, from the beginning." I looked at Sister Dolores, who nodded encouragingly. I took a deep breath, smelling the familiar scent of candles and old wood that always gave me courage. "I was 8 years old when it all started," I murmured, my voice coming out thinner and younger than I intended. "I was playing in the backyard of my grandmother's house in Belém Pará. It was a Saturday morning, I remember, because I had promised to help her make acai for lunch. The words began to flow like a dammed river that finally finds a crack in the dam. I told her about the Amazonian heat, about my cousins running around the yard, about the last clear moment I had of really being a child. I was climbing a mango tree when I felt a strange dizziness. It wasn't hunger, it wasn't tiredness. It was as if something was pulling me from the inside out, as if my soul was being stretched. I paused, remembering the feeling that still haunted me in nightmares. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital here in Boston, 4 years later in this body." Marcus typed frantically, occasionally stopping to look at me with an intensity that made me feel like an insect under a microscope. "What? About your parents, your family?" he asked. "I never saw them again. The doctors said I was found unconscious at the port with no ID. No one ever came looking for me." My voice broke a little. "Sometimes I wonder if they think I died that day in the backyard." Sister Dolores approached and placed her hand on my shoulder, as she always did when the memories became too heavy. "And when did you find out about your effect on people?" Marcus continued. "Soon after Sister Dolores found me. There was a woman in the shelter, Carmen, who was sick, stomach cancer. She cried every night in pain. I closed my eyes, seeing Carmen's thin yellow face again. I couldn't stand to see her suffer. One night, I sat down next to her bed and said, 'Get well, and may you never feel pain again.' And what happened? She got better. Completely. The doctors called it a miracle. The cancer had disappeared without explanation. I opened my eyes and looked directly at Marcus. 3 weeks later, she died in a car accident. She hit a tree at 100 miles an hour. The police said she didn't try to brake." Marcus stopped typing. "Did she kill herself?" "The official report said it was an accident, but I saw her eyes in her last days. Something was wrong. She was empty. As if the price of not feeling physical pain was not feeling anything, at all." Sister Dolores picked up her diary and placed it on the coffee table. "Show him, Caetano. Tell him about the others." Over the next 40 minutes, I revealed to Marcus Webb a gallery of horrors that I carried in my memory. Roberto, the unemployed man I wanted to find work. He got a job in construction and died on his first day when a beam fell on him. Sarah, the young mother I wanted to find true love. She developed an unhealthy obsession with a married man and ended up in jail for stalking. James, the drug addict I wanted to stop destroying himself, stopped using drugs but developed a gambling addiction that led him to rob a bank. Jesus Christ, Marcus muttered after I finished, running his hands through his hair. How many people? 237, Sister Dolores replied, consulting her diary. Documented since Caetano arrived here. Marcus was silent for a long moment, staring at his notes. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his eyes, no longer scientific curiosity, but a kind of fascinated horror. Caetano, I need to show you something. He turned the laptop toward us and opened a folder full of files. I wasn't just investigating the recent coincidences, I dug deeper. The screen showed newspaper clippings, some yellowed with age, others more recent. Headlines in Portuguese, English, Spanish. Boy mysteriously disappears while playing in backyard. Belém, 2019. Family searches for child who vanished without a trace. Belém, 2019. Marcus clicked on another file. Elderly man found unconscious in Boston Harbor with no memory or ID. Boston, 2023. My heart stopped. There was a police photo, blurry and grainy, but it was unmistakably me. The same wrinkled face, the same light brown eyes, the same lost and frightened expression. How did you get this? Sister Dolores asked, her voice tense. Connections in the police, professional favors. Marcus clicked on another file. But that's not the most disturbing part. The new screen showed a series of international articles. Unexplained phenomena haunt village in rural France, Le Monde, 1987. Mysterious tragic coincidences terrify German town, Der Spiegel, 1965. The Cursed Boy of London, a medical mystery, The Times, 1923. What is this? I asked, though a terrible part of me already knew. Patterns, Caetano. The same pattern of supernatural events, always centered on a child who ages abnormally. Marcus turned the screen back to us. And look at the dates. 1923, 1965, 1987. There's a time pattern, too. Sister Dolores crossed herself. Are you suggesting that this has happened before? Several times, in different countries, different eras, but always the same phenomenon. Marcus looked directly at me. Caetano, I don't think you're unique. I think you're part of something much bigger and much older. I felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. That's impossible. Then how do you explain this? Marcus clicked on one last file. It was a black and white photo, obviously very old, of a boy who looked about 8 years old. A boy with straight black hair, light brown eyes, and a shy smile. It was me, exactly as I was before everything changed, but the photo was dated 1923, in London. Where did you get this? I whispered. Scotland Yard Archives. Case closed on a boy named William Morrison, who disappeared in 1923 and reappeared as an elderly man in 1925, causing a series of accidental deaths before disappearing again. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear my own heart beating. I could feel the weight of an impossible truth settling on my already hunched shoulders. Are you saying I'm immortal? I asked, my voice coming out as a hoarse whisper. I'm saying you're part of a cycle. And if my calculations are correct based on historical patterns. Marcus paused, as if hesitating to continue. Speak, Sister Dolores ordered. The cycle is accelerating. The apparitions are happening more frequently, and each one seems to be more intense than the last. Marcus closed the laptop, slowly. Caetano, I don't think you're just a victim of this curse. I think you're the epicenter of something that's getting stronger. At that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a familiar tingling starting at my fingertips. The same feeling that preceded every disaster I caused, but this time it was different, more powerful, more urgent. And for the first time since I woke up in this cursed body, I was afraid of what my own words could do, not just to one person, but perhaps to the entire world. Marcus, I said, struggling to control my voice, I think you should leave. Now. But it was too late. The power was building inside me like a storm, and I could feel that this time it would be impossible to contain it. The power exploded inside me like a broken dam. My vision darkened at the edges, and I felt as if 1,000 voices were screaming inside my head. The voices of all the people I had destroyed over the centuries, the voices of William Morrison in London, Jean-Pierre in Paris, Klaus in Berlin, and so many others that my fragmented mind could no longer distinguish. "Get out!" I shouted, but it was no longer my boy's voice or my old man's voice. It was something ancient, something that came from much deeper than my 12-year-old soul. "Get out before I destroy you too!" Marcus stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. Sister Dolores, however, stood firm beside me, even as the temperature in the room began to drop dramatically, and the candles on the altars lit themselves with dancing blue flames. "Caetano, son, you can control this," she said, her calm voice cutting through the supernatural chaos that was unfolding around me. "You are stronger than this curse." But I wasn't stronger. I could feel myself losing control completely, the power taking over every cell in my aging body. My skin began to glow with an unhealthy light, and when I looked down at my hands, I saw that the wrinkles were deepening even further, as if I were aging decades in seconds. "No," I whispered, desperately trying to contain the force that threatened to explode. I can't let this happen again." Memories began to flood back in violent torrents. London, 1925. I had tried to help an entire family during the Great Depression, wishing they would never go hungry again. A week later, the entire neighborhood had been ravaged by a mysterious fire. 17 dead. Berlin, 1967. I tried to cure a boy with polio. He got better, but an unexplained epidemic swept through the city. Paris, 1989. A young single mother. I wished her happiness. She won the lottery and then killed her 3 children before committing suicide. "I am a plague!" I screamed, and the windows of the foster home exploded simultaneously, sending shards of glass flying across the room. "Everything I touch turns to death." Sister Dolores was bleeding from a cut on her face, but she didn't leave my side. Marcus was hiding behind the sofa, recording everything on his cell phone with trembling hands. "You're not a curse, Caetano," Sister Dolores insisted, wiping the blood away with the sleeve of her habit. "You're a scared child who needs help." "A child?" The voice that came out of me now echoed with centuries of agony. "I am over 100 years old. I have seen empires fall. I have unintentionally caused wars. I am the angel of death, disguised as kindness." It was then that the oldest memories began to surface. Memories that weren't mine, but somehow lived inside me. A child in an ancient temple, priests in golden robes, a ritual that went wrong, a curse that should have lasted a lifetime, but became eternal. "I remember," I whispered, my voice returning to normal as the power momentarily subsided. "I remember the first one." Sister Dolores knelt beside me, ignoring the shards of glass cutting into her knees. "Tell me, son. Tell me everything." There was a temple in Mesopotamia over 2,000 years ago. The words came out of me as if they were coming from someone else. A child was offered to the gods to save the city from a plague, but the ritual was corrupted. Instead of death, the child was given eternal life. Instead of sacrifice, she became the eternal sacrifice. Marcus had stopped recording and was staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Are you saying you're the same child from 2,000 years ago?" "No," I replied, feeling tears running down my wrinkled face. "I'm just the latest incarnation. Every few decades, the curse chooses a new innocent child. The previous child disappears. And I appear with all the memories, all the guilt, all the destructive power." "And what happens to the previous child?" Sister Dolores asked, though from the tone of her voice, I knew she already suspected the answer. "She dies. She simply disintegrates, as if she never existed." I looked down at my trembling hands. "And I carry all her memories, all her sins, William Morrison wasn't a different person. He was me. Jean-Pierre was me. Klaus was me. We are all the same damned soul, jumping from body to body, spreading misery wherever we go. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of approaching sirens. Someone had called the police because of the exploding windows. "Caetano," Marcus said, putting away his cell phone and approaching cautiously. "If you really are immortal, if you've been through this before, there must be a way to break the curse." "There isn't," I replied with the certainty of centuries of trying. "I've tried everything. Total isolation, suicide, exorcism, nothing works. The curse always finds a way to keep me alive long enough to cause more destruction." Sister Dolores rose slowly, her knees bleeding through the fabric of her habit. "But this time it's different, Caetano. This time you're afraid of hurting people. In your other incarnations, did you care about that?" I paused, thinking about memories that weren't mine. William Morrison had been colder, more calculating. Jean-Pierre had embraced his power, using it deliberately to make money. Klaus had become almost cruel, seeing people as toys for his supernatural experiments. "No," I admitted. I always ended up corrupting myself. The power, the loneliness, the guilt, always turned me into something monstrous. Then, maybe that's the key, Sister Dolores said, her words cutting through the despair that was consuming me. Maybe you need to hold on to your humanity, your kindness, even in the face of power. The sirens were closer now. In a few minutes, the police would be at the door, and I would have to explain the inexplicable or run away once again. "It's no use," I said, struggling to my feet. "You saw what happened here. I can't control it, and it's getting stronger with every incarnation." "Then let's go," Marcus said suddenly. "All three of us. Let's get out of Boston before you hurt someone else." "Where to?" Sister Dolores asked. Marcus looked at me, then at her. "MIT. I know researchers there, people who study paranormal phenomena. Maybe they can help." "No," I replied, immediately. "No experiments, no scientists. I've been through this before. They always try to use the power for their own ends." "Then what do you want to do?" Marcus insisted. "Stay here until you cause another disaster like Margaret." "Holloway?" The question hit me like a punch in the stomach. He was right. Every day I stayed in Boston, more people were at risk. And now that the power was intensifying, there was no guarantee I could contain it next time. "I have an idea, Sister," Dolores said, her voice soft but determined. "There's an isolated monastery in Maine, Trappist monks who have taken a vow of silence. If you can't talk to people, you can't curse them." For a moment I felt a spark of hope, a place where I could exist without destroying innocent lives, where my cursed goodness couldn't hurt anyone. But then the sirens stopped outside the house, and I knew that even this small hope might be too little, too late. "Sister Dolores," I said, my voice breaking, "I'm sorry for everything, for bringing this curse into your life." She placed her hands on my shoulders and looked me in, the eyes with that maternal determination I knew so well. "Caetano Silva, you are the best boy I have ever known, and I will not let this curse define who you are." Loud banging on the door echoed through the house. It was time to decide, run away once again, or finally face who I really was. For the first time in over 100 years, I chose to stay and fight. "Boston police, open the door!" The knocking grew more insistent, and I could hear the sound of radios crackling outside. Sister Dolores looked at me, then at Marcus, and finally walked to the door with a calmness that only she possessed. "Just a moment, officers," she shouted. "There has been an accident with the windows, but we are all fine." As she bought time, Marcus approached me urgently. "Caetano, listen. You said that in your other incarnations you always became corrupt, right? That you always ended up using your power selfishly?" "Yes," I replied, not understanding where he was going with this. "But this time it's different. You're fighting it. You're afraid of hurting people." He took my wrinkled arm gently. "What if the difference is that this time you're not alone?" I looked at Sister Dolores, who was still negotiating with the police, making up a story about gas pipes and a pressure explosion. She was risking her reputation, her religious life, everything for me. What do you mean? William Morrison was alone in London. Jean-Pierre was alone in Paris. Klaus was alone in Berlin. Marcus spoke quickly, his words tumbling out. But you have Sister Dolores. You have someone who loves you unconditionally, who sees you as the child you really are inside. A strange feeling began to form in my chest. It wasn't the familiar, tingling of cursed power, but something warmer, softer. Was it hope? Do you think it makes a difference? I think love can be more powerful than any curse, Marcus said, and for the first time since I'd known him, his voice was filled with genuine emotion rather than scientific curiosity. Sister Dolores returned to us, her face tense but determined. They're leaving for now, but they'll be back with an investigation team in the morning. We have a few hours to decide what to do. I sat down in the armchair, feeling the weight of centuries of loneliness and guilt pressing down on my shoulders. But for the first time, I wasn't carrying that weight alone. Sister, I said, my voice coming out small and frightened like the child I really was. What if I try to use the power differently? What if instead of trying to fix people, I just love them? She knelt in front of me, her calloused hands holding mine. What do you mean, son? Every time I've used the power, it's been to change something. To give money, health, love, work. Always trying to improve people's lives. I took a deep breath, feeling a clarity I hadn't felt in decades. But what if what they really need isn't change but acceptance? What if the power could be used just to comfort? Marcus leaned forward, interested. Can you control specifically what the power does? I've never tried. It's always been instinctive, emotional. I looked at my hands, wondering if it was possible to use that destructive force for something genuinely good. But maybe if I focused on the intention rather than the result. It's risky, Sister Dolores said, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't fear. It was faith. If it goes wrong, I'll cause another disaster and probably die in the process, I finished for her. But if it goes right, maybe I can finally break this cycle. At that moment, as if fate were testing my resolve, we heard a low cry coming from the hallway. It was Sophia, a 6-year-old girl who had arrived at the shelter the week before with her mother, fleeing an abusive husband. She had nightmares every night and refused to speak to anyone. She's scared again, Sister Dolores whispered, starting to get up. No, I said, putting my hand on her arm. Let me try. I got up slowly and walked down the hallway. Sophia was sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, hugging a worn teddy bear. When she saw me, her eyes widened in fear. I must have looked scary, an old stranger with torn clothes and cuts on my face. But instead of trying to fix her fear or cure her nightmares, I simply sat down on the floor next to her, ignoring the pain in my old knees. Hi, Sophia, I said softly. Would you like some company? She looked at me suspiciously but nodded slightly. You know, I have nightmares sometimes too, I continued, my voice taking on the gentle tone I used when I was really just a child talking to another. They can be very scary. Sophia hugged her teddy bear tighter. The monsters come to get me in my dreams. I understand. But you know what I've learned about monsters? I looked at her with complete sincerity. Sometimes monsters are scared too, and sometimes all they need is someone who understands them. I felt the power begin to move within me, but this time it was different. It wasn't the destructive, desperate force of before. It was soft, warm, like a hug. Sophia, I said, letting that gentle energy flow through my words. You are brave and strong, and you are not alone. Nightmares can't really hurt you, and there will always be people here who care about you. It wasn't a blessing to change her life or take away her problems. It was simply an acknowledgement of her humanity, an affirmation that she was seen and loved exactly as she was. Sophia looked at me for a long moment, then held out her tiny hand. When our hands touched, I felt something I had never felt before. Power. transforming into something pure, something that nurtured rather than destroyed. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time since she arrived, she smiled. We returned to the living room together, Sophia holding my wrinkled hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sister Dolores was waiting for us, with tears in her eyes. "How do you feel?" she asked. I paused to analyze. The power was still there, but it was peaceful, like a river that had found its natural bed instead of overflowing destructively. "Different," I replied honestly. "I can still feel the strength, but it's as if it finally knows where to go." Marcus, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "Caetano, I think you did it. I think you found a way to break the pattern." "I haven't broken anything yet," I said, helping Sophia sit down on the couch. "But maybe I've found a way to live with it without causing destruction." In the weeks that followed, I carefully tested this new approach. When people came to the shelter seeking help, I didn't try to solve their problems with magic, words. Instead, I simply offered presence, understanding, acceptance, and somehow that seemed to be more powerful than any curse. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lost her job, didn't win the lottery after talking to me, but she found the strength to enroll in a technical course and slowly rebuild her career. Tommy, the addicted teenager, wasn't magically cured, but he felt accepted enough to seek help voluntarily. Marcus documented everything, but his approach had changed as well. It was no longer about exposing a phenomenon, but about understanding how genuine kindness could overcome even the oldest curses. "You know what I think?" Sister Dolores said one evening 6 months later as we drank tea in the kitchen. "I think the curse was never about power itself. It was about loneliness. It was about a child carrying a burden too heavy to bear without anyone to share it." I looked out the window, seeing the lights of Boston twinkling in the distance. I still looked like I was 70, still carried the memories of all my previous incarnations. But for the first time in centuries, I didn't feel like a monster. "Sister," I said, my voice carrying all the gratitude a 12-year-old could feel. "Thank you for teaching me that being different doesn't mean being dangerous." She smiled, that motherly smile that had saved me from the very first day. "Thank you for reminding me that miracles don't have to be big to be real." Across the table, Sophia, now sleeping without nightmares, drew a picture of the three of us together. In her childish vision, I wasn't an old man haunted by curses. I was just Caetano, who told funny stories and always had time to listen. And, maybe, after more than 100 years of existence, that was exactly what I should have always been. Not a cursed oracle destined to spread tragedy. Just a child who had learned that the greatest power of all is simply to love people exactly as they are. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Joven Sobernaturais channel for more disturbing stories like this one. And leave a rating from 0 to 10 for this story in the comments. It's very important to me. Also, tell us what you liked most about the story. Thank you for following this adventure to the end.